I'm Ann Hoffer. I'm interviewing Isabel Carpenter Masland. She lived at the 2 Mile House, and we are anxious to hear about her experiences. Today is October the 27th, 2014, and we are doing this interview at the Cumberland County Historical Society. Isabel, can you tell us the dates that you lived at the 2 Mile House?
I can't tell you the exact dates, but we moved into 2 Mile House in the summer of 1940, and I think we were there about 5 years before we sold it to Mrs. King. And I remember we had lived in Harrisburg, and my parents had decided to move, and one Saturday my dad drove me over here, and we went to see Mrs. Moore. And she lived in a nice brick house, I think on Walnut and Moreland Avenue. I'm not certain of that. But she was just a grand old lady, and I was probably 13, 14, and definitely on my good behavior. And she was just very gracious, and my father just kind of said, I'd like to buy the 2 Mile House, and she kind of said, fine, and I don't remember any big hoopla about it.
Did she go to the 2 Mile House as a summer home?
I don't think so. I think she had permanently moved out of it. Perhaps she'd been widowed. I do not know. But we continued to drop in on her all the time we owned the house. And always my father would bring me, and, I had to wash my face and that stuff. And she would have tea and cookies and ginger ale for me or something like that. And they would just visit. And that was kind of an accepted way to socialize in those days. When we bought the house, there was still a lot of furniture in it, and we did not have furniture of that scale. And I do believe that we bought 2 large oriental rugs from her, and cupboards, I think dining room tables, and the breakfast room, and a big tall mirror, almost Rococo style, with a marble semicircle platform in front of it, which I always thought was kind of gross, but we did buy it. And I think there were 2 in the living room. I think one is still there. I remember as a child being extremely impressed by the cellarette in the den that had running water inside a cabinet. I thought that was pretty nifty.
Everybody asks me why there are 2 dining rooms.
Well, I assume that the main dining room, which was on the front of the house, was the bar of the original tavern.
Yes.
There were 2 doors into it, and the one has now become the second window. You can, if you look at the stonework, you can tell that. And I imagine the breakfast room was where the workers and family ate at that time. We called it a breakfast room, and we did not use the big dining room unless we had company. But the breakfast room was, of course, handy to the kitchen, such as it was, and kind of a pathway in and out of the rest of the house.
Let's talk about the second floor.
The second floor, as I remember it, had 4 bedrooms, and I was given at first, the little bedroom over the breakfast room.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only room for a single bed, as I remember, and I think it had to be against the wall. Later on, the part that was over the kitchen. I think we divided it. We added a shower or a tub, I can't remember which, and that kind of became a little apartment I used later on when the war kind of took over things. I remember sweating over picking out the wallpaper, and I saw the same wallpaper was still on there many, many years later.
And you used the back stairway?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
My parents and anyone else used the main stairway, but I always used the back one. And that was, very convenient for quietly getting in or out or whatever.
Now, when you first moved there, how many were in your family?
My sister was in college, and she was occasionally in and out for a weekend. There was myself, my father, and my mother, and that was it. I had a grandmother who sometimes came to visit for the weekend, but she lived north of Harrisburg, so she didn't really live with us at that time. And we had no servants, so it was...
Would you explain why you moved to Carlisle
Well, basically,
from Harrisburg?
We were Harrisburg people. But the flood of 36 had really hit Harrisburg very hard. And there was typhoid fever afterwards and an awful mess. And it hit Harrisburg so bad, I think, because our sewer system went into the river and our drinking water came out of the river. So that isn't how you're supposed to do it. And my father was a water engineer. I used to always say he was a dam builder, which he was. And his company was asked by Mayor DeHart to design a new and pure water system for Harrisburg. My dad explored everywhere and decided on Clark's Creek, and it was up in the second ridge of mountains as you go north of Harrisburg. And it was passed that they would build this dam. I guess the papers got a little uptight that it would raise taxes. We all understand this. And people began to throw eggs at our house sometimes in Harrisburg, or a rotten tomato. And there would be articles in the newspaper. You can imagine they were kind of vitriolic towards this whole thing. The other thing that happened a little bit as this was going on was the school system was not top-notch in Harrisburg. And I had to walk 16 blocks to 7th grade. And it was not a very integrated school. And this bothered my parents, mainly because I wasn't getting an education. So it was at the end of my 7th grade that I guess they heard about 2 Mile House and went and looked at it and loved it. I mean, that's all I know. And there was a war in Europe, but we didn't visualize that we were going to be affected by this war. So we moved in during the summer, and from my standpoint, I knew nobody. Mm. And I was going to go to a strange school, which that problem continued all my life. But we were introduced to some people, and
you had been coming to Craighead.
Yes, we were in Harrisburg. We were very close friends with Gene and Myra Craighead. I even called them aunt and uncle, and we went there weekends when the other Craighead families who were from Washington and other places were not going to be there. My father did a lot of work at Craighead, but mostly we just loved going for the weekend and swimming. And my father was very musical. We always sang at night. So I knew the people from Craighead and Frank and Jen Masland and the other people from Carlisle that occasionally came out there. But our trips to Craighead stopped abruptly when war was declared. Just like everything.
How did it affect your driving when you lived out? That was sort of in the country, the 2 Mile House.
It was completely in the country. There was nothing. The Sadler estate was behind a wall. I mean, we didn't. Rationing came pretty quick, gas rationing. And I was supposedly not driving yet, though I believe I occasionally did. But no, I mean, we could not go into Harrisburg to see our friends, and they really didn't come to see us without thinking about it, because it was a long trip and it used a good bit of gas. And everybody's life was just not totally turned upside down, but for a lot of people it was.
Where did you shop?
There was a butcher shop on South Hanover, and we always shopped at the butcher shop. And Market was on the square, where I guess the new courthouse is now. And we always came to Market. And it was a problem for me because many of the stalls were Amish. And we were somehow like third or fourth cousins to the Bear family. And I wasn't allowed to go up to the stall because the young Amish boys weren't supposed to talk to a un-Amish young girl. And that always was a little off-putting to me, but that's how it worked. As the war developed, two things happened which affected 2 Mile House. First off, my father's company, and I think him directly.
Name the company.
It was Gannett, Fleming, Cordray, and then later became Gannett, Fleming, Cordray, and Carpenter, now known as Ganfleck. And I think the Army called for an engineer to design and build some Army posts. And my father was asked to do it, and I think you just didn't say no to the U.S. government. So he was sent out to north of Pittsburgh, Greenville, I think was the name of the place, where he was to design and build rapidly Army barracks for the training of soldiers. This created a problem with me. My mother was not well, and what was he to do with me? So I remember he went into Carlisle one Sunday and took me, and opposite Lambert or Lamberton School, where I was to go for 8th grade, a senior citizen lady ran a boarding house or an overnight stop place, and she took in truck drivers. But my dad talked her into taking me in, and I was told, and I always did what I was told, believe it or not, I was told that I was to live in that bedroom in that lady's house, and I think she gave me cereal for breakfast, but the lunch and dinner were my concern, and that weekends I could ride my bike out to 2 Mile House, which was empty, and I was to check the house and check mail and things like that, and then get back before dark to the lady's house.
Tell us how you got back to the 2 Mile House.
Well, several things happened. A family that was aware of how I was living came and said that I was going to go live with them, which was fine. I knew their daughter. And I went and lived with that family probably for the rest of the 8th grade. But then, by then, the Army War College in Carlisle was a key place where colonels or majors who were being sent overseas to a command position were brought up to date with the latest information. And they were told that they could, since they were going overseas right after their 6 weeks at the Army War College, that they could bring their wives. Well, there was no place for the wives. There were no motels. There was a James Wilson Hotel downtown, which didn't have a real good reputation. And a call came out to everyone in Carlisle, can you take in these families, which in most cases was really just the wife, and the man would be around weekends. And my dad saw this as I think, a very nice solution to my situation. And before I knew it, we had the three upstairs bedrooms either rented or given out to officers and their wives. And in one case, they had a baby with them. And my dad was home for the weekend and on his way back to the Army base where he was constructing. And he just kind of said to me, you're in charge, kid. And my mother was at a hospital being treated at that time. So I thought, oh my gosh.
And how old do you think you were?
I think I was 15.
So you ran the house with the Army wives?
Yes, they were all very nice, and I guess
I'm sure, yeah.
by the Army standards they'd been taught to obey, because the first thing I did, having been a Girl Scout, was to run and make a caper chart. And I said to the one, you're in charge of the food and cooking for this week, and you're in charge for cleaning up the kitchen and all this. And then one, I think, probably had to help me clean the house. But looking back, I think they must have thought, what have we gotten into? But it was an experience for me. And we pulled the ration stamps. We had ration stamps for meat and sugar and, of course, gasoline. And I had the feeling that we got more because they had been taken from their home and put in this situation. It was absolutely fascinating what ended up on the table for dinner. I had never been exposed to Southern cooking or Mexican cooking, all this crazy food which we now have scattered all around at Chipotle and all these places. But, you know, I would look at my plate and think, what is this? And it was an experience. And I remember one time we had, one of the women was from the South during that rotation. And I was cleaning up and there was white gravy. And my reaction was, ugh. And I was beginning to dump it in the sink. And she said, oh, no. Put it in the refrigerator. We'll make sandwiches out of it tomorrow. So at noon the next day, we had a slice of white bread, a slice of cold white gelatinous gravy. And they all thought, boy, it's good to have this stuff, you know.
Now, how many years did that go on?
I think it went on for about 1 year.
Just
and
1 year. And
then I was sent to boarding school.
Then your parents sold the house?
Well, they sent me to boarding school. That was my 9th, 10th,
Mm-hmm.
11th, and 12th grade. No, it was 10th, 11th, and 12th. And I would say probably around 11th grade or 4 or 5 years after we had moved in to 2 Mile House that our dad realized he needed to be closer to Harrisburg. And his company was getting bigger and bigger. And
So you moved to Mechanicsburg.
out in the country,
And
yes,
can you
near
tell-
Bowmansdale.
Can you tell us the name of the house?
It was called Kona, and it was Henry B. McCormick's house. And again, my father took me in to see Mrs. McCormick and said he wanted to buy this house. And she gave us cookies and ginger ale. I mean, it was just kind of a replay of the scene with Mrs. Moore. There was no real estate agent or anything like that. When the war came, we quickly dug a big victory garden
At 2 Mile
at
House.
2 Mile House. And when you said, we shopped for things, we were providing, I think, all of our own vegetables at that time. And we had the grape arbor, which looks like it's been reconstructed to me, but we bagged the grapes and I imagine made wine from them. We had
Apples.
a couple apple trees in the back acreage because the land went way back. And I can remember being told to put all these apples in bushel baskets, and we didn't even wash them. We took them over to Craighead, and they had a cider press there. And I can remember we came home with a whole lot of cider, which we put in a barrel out in the little terrace, kind of in the middle of 2 Mile House. And every morning I was to go out and put my hands in and get the ice out, because this was going to turn out to be an alcoholic drink called Applejack. I don't think it was very successful, but it was an interesting little thing we did.
Let's talk about the outside of the house. There was a barn.
Well, the barn belonged to the farmer.
Mm-hmm.
And he had cows, and I would try to go over and be buddy with him at night, and he taught me how to milk, but he didn't want me around, really. And they may have had chickens. I don't remember. Their house was then a little further from us. And yet I feel we went over there for our eggs, so they probably did have chickens.
But you said the cows came right in
To the barn.
on the boundary of 2 Mile House
Yes.
into the barn.
And they knew where to go, and they knew which stall was theirs.
You don't remember the corn crib?
No, I don't remember that. Now, that doesn't say it wasn't there. We did have a 3-sided shelter a little further back, towards the back of the property. And the first summer, we realized this was an awful lot of land to take care of. And my dad, I don't know where he got them, brought in 4 sheep and I guess a ram who was nasty. And they kind of, by eating the grass, kept the middle part of the property pretty well down. I don't remember wild animals particularly. You would think there would have been raccoons and skunks. And I really don't remember that we saw any of that. Of course, there were very few outside lights.
Was the road dirt or was it?
Walnut Bottom
Uh-huh.
Road, it had been paved.
It had been
It
paved.
was not real wide,
Mhm.
but it was paved, and I could ride my bike, and it was paved. The furthest I ever rode my bike was up to 7 Mile House, and so I know it was paved that far, and definitely paved into Carlisle. And
Now, I ask you because of seeing pictures of the Moore family and all the help they had, if you had help.
We had no help at all. I hung the laundry in that terrace between the two wings of the house because we didn't want it hung out in public. And I mowed the grass, or my father, if he was around. And it was a hand mower. I took care of the Victory Garden, and it was a good learning experience. We grew just about every vegetable that we were used to eating. My father was forever on the road or coming in from somewhere. And I remember he'd often open the trunk. Once he handed me a turkey, and it was dead. It had been butchered, I guess. But the feathers, everything on, and he said, I have to get back to work. Let's have this for dinner. And my sister was home, and we looked at this. We had no idea what you do with a turkey. But I think we pulled the feathers out one by one, finally cut the skin off the bird, and we ate it. And once he brought in a possum and left it on the back porch outside the breakfast room door. And I don't think my sister was there, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is that for dinner tomorrow night? But of course the possum woke up and was gone. He was far gone when we woke up in the morning, which was a blessing.
Do you remember the 2 Mile House favorably?
I remember it as a beautiful house. If I had to give it in one word, I would say lonely. I was terribly lonely. And I remember one night there was a prison camp up at Pine Grove for German prisoners. And very often we'd hear, of course, we didn't have the kind of news coverage you have now, but we'd hear that some had escaped. And I would be often in the house alone at night. And I can remember sitting in my bedroom in that deep windowsill and looking down on the driveway, sure that a German prisoner or 2 or 3 was going to be creeping up that driveway. They never did, but it was a very lonely place for me. I mean, there were no children. There was no one around that house.
Did you, I guess, when did you stop going to the Lamberton School? In what grade?
I went in 8th and 9th.
Okay, and then you went away to school. So you didn't have to worry about getting to the Lamberton building.
No. And often, my father was in and out, and sometimes when he was home, of course, I would just ride my bike to school. And when the women from the Army War College were there, I think they realized that they had to keep an eye on me. And I was very naive, as were many young girls at that time. At the boarding house, the woman locked me in my room every night. And she was protecting me, but I did not realize it. I just saw it's kind of, I'm not going to run away, but that wasn't what she was worried about. But,
And there was no garage there in the 40s.
I do not remember putting cars in a garage. And I would have, because I would have been the one, somebody would have said, Isabel, go put my car in the garage. And we might have used it for tools, But again, we didn't have a lot of tools. We had a shovel, a lawnmower, and a hammer. You didn't have the array of yard equipment that we would have today.
You described two things to me that you liked. One was the cistern.
Yes. Oh, I romanticized about the cistern that, again, was between the two wings of the building. And, of course, this was a while ago. Friend Jenny Goodyear, who became a playmate and could come out every now and then, we lifted the plate or whatever it was and kind of put our heads down, and we thought, oh, it was a stop on the Underground Railroad, because 4, 5, 6 people could have fit in there. Now, they couldn't have had a bed, and my dad said no, that wasn't what it was for. But we kind of romanticized about things like that.
And you also mentioned the patio.
Yeah, the patio was lovely out from, we called it the den, I think. We never used the living room. That was just a walk-through space. But the patio was absolutely lovely with a beautiful silver maple tree. I can't believe that would still be there, but just a gorgeous tree spread out, giving you shade. And, if somebody stopped in, that's where we took them right away.
Were there roses and so forth
No.
around the house?
No.
There weren't many flowers then. There are pictures of the Moors entertaining in the front yard.
We never entertained it. We didn't entertain much. I mean, this was, we were at war.
The war. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I am not aware of any flowers anywhere, really.
I think it would be nice if we could discuss your life. You've been so successful. You said that it was so lonely at the 2 Mile House, and I
Yeah.
certainly understand. And you went away to boarding school,
Yes.
and I went away to boarding school, and I actually liked boarding school. I don't know what you thought.
I managed it.
And where did you go?
I went to Stewart Hall in Stanton, Virginia.
And then where did you go to college?
Hood College.
Oh, in Goucher.
In-
near
in Frederick.
Frederick, excuse me.
Yeah.
Goucher College, yeah.
And I think probably as you've heard the story of my life at 2 Mile House, my father taught me I could do anything. And it was, what do you want to be? It wasn't try to be a secretary or anything else.
Well, that's why I wanted to talk about it, because then, did you go to graduate school?
No. I majored in economics and was offered a job with the federal government as an economist, but just decided I didn't want to live in Washington, D.C. So I first went into professional Girl Scouting and worked in New Jersey, Rhode Island, and then in the Harrisburg office. And got married. We moved to Rhode Island for 8 years.
And you married
Dan Masland.
Dan Masland, who
And-
worked for Masland's?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first married him, we bought the house at Craighead, which is across from the one they're trying to preserve now, and lived there for 2 years and worked hard fixing that house up. But it was kind of a hopeless situation, as are many frame houses.
Is that house still standing?
Yes. It did have a fire at some point. And
And then when did you start your successful business?
Around 1978, I was always interested in the economics of the stock market, and my dad had taught me this, and I called my stockbroker in Philadelphia if he would give me a recommendation for me to get a job somewhere. And he kind of hesitated, and he said, I'll call you back in a half hour. I can't talk now, or something like that. And the next thing I knew, the phone rang, and it was the president of the company. And he said, we want you. We will train you. How much do you want to be paid? And then it came out that women stockbrokers just didn't exist at that time. And I had been putting my kids through college doing trading options for myself, and even they didn't understand what I was doing. So anyways, I became their first female.
And what was the name of the firm?
Newbolt's.
Okay.
W.H. Newbolt's out of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And then finally became head of the office here. And I hired a few other women who were pretty sharp. And we just decided we could do this ourselves, which we did. And so we formed a company, Masland and Barrick, and I had wonderful associates for the next 30, 35 years.
And your office is still on the Trindle Road?
Yes, and right at the edge of Camp
We
Hill.
passed it today, yes. And you live?
In Lemoyne, up over the restaurant row, I guess you would say, with a wonderful view of the river.
Cumberland
Yeah.
Road.
Cumberland Road, it's called. It's just a little street.
You do have a wonderful view. How
Yes.
long have you been there?
About 35 years.
That's wonderful.
Yes, it's prime real estate for the view, not for much else. But no, and Negley Park is right there. Which
Would you
is,
tell us your age?
born in 28, I must be 86, 87, somewhere in there.
Well, you've had a wonderful life.
Well, I hope to keep having it. We'll see.
You like to travel.
I love to travel. I've collected seashells, done a lot of scuba diving around the world looking for seashells. And I've become very interested in the cultures of people that have been remote, like New Guinea and the Aborigines in Australia. And I have given a good many lectures and classes on my travels to these remote tribes and studying what they believe and why they believe it, how they live, and how they're trying to adjust to being in two cultures at this point. And even the languages are fast fading. They won't be here. So I've done a lot of traveling with Smithsonian Institute, and I just enjoy learning about it.
Where is your collection of seashells?
My collection
going?
of seashells was accepted at the Natural History Museum, called the Oaks Museum at Messiah College. They already had a good collection, but thankfully we're very happy to take mine. And it's a neat little natural history museum, mostly
Yes, it is.
animals, but they have a large and good seashell area, and they've made a library out of the seashell books that I gave them. So does that bring you up to date?
Yeah. Well, I admire you, and I think we should know your history as well as the 2 Mile House.
It's been a wonderful life.
Now, tell me, have you been back to the 2 Mile House recently?
Not recently, no. It was during one of your first Scottish celebrations that
McLean Festival.
Yeah, that I went back and walked through the house.
Were there some things that were still like it was in 1940?
The wallpaper I selected for that upper bedroom, yes. I would say practically everything was the same.
You mean the rooms and
the rooms, everything. I felt there was new lumber in the grape arbor, and it was slightly different.
yeah, it was falling down a little.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't see. And the back part, of course, has probably gone a little more. Well, it wasn't wild. No, it was nicely mowed, whether by sheep or not, I don't know. But
Did you use the fireplaces when you were there?
just the one in the back den.
Well, yeah, I think we've had a good conversation. Is there anything?
I'm delighted to share my experience with you.
And you haven't been to the Historical Society for,
No, I think this building is gorgeous. Let me see if I had anything else here on my
isn't that
notes.
nice that we have a new fan?
Yes, you do. You do.
We've talked before. We came here twice, I guess, and you've made notes. Have we covered your
Oh,
notes?
the one thing I did want to tell you, just because it was funny. We came from Harrisburg, where we had a normal telephone. At 2 Mile House, we were on the party line. And our ring was 1 long and 4 short.
Oh, gosh.
And that meant we were to pick it up.
Where was the phone?
It was in the kitchen, right by the door to the central patio.
Do you know where Mary King had her phone?
No.
In the bathroom on the 2nd floor.
Oh, no. Well, and, we took off and cranked it.
Uh-huh.
And the operator would come on and say, yes. And I would say, I want to talk to so-and-so. And I was usually calling somebody I had met in town. But anybody could be on the line. So you would talk to someone for maybe 5 minutes, and a third voice comes on and says, how much longer are you going to be? I want to call the butcher. And you think, oh my gosh, what have I said in the past 5 minutes? And then by the same token, you want to make a call, and there's some women gabbing and gabbing and gabbing. Or the operator will say to you, well, if you want to call up here at the butcher shop, I know they're not in. I just... But your business was totally open to anybody. And that, as a teenage girl, was a little bothersome.
Yeah, and just think how life has changed.
Yes.
One time we had a reception here, and this lady came in, and my husband was standing beside me, and George said, after she said hello, George said, that's the operator. He recognized her by her voice.
I don't think, in the 4 years we were there, we had that phone system, and we didn't get anything more modern.
And you only had one phone.
That's right.
And I guess you only had one big bathroom.
Oh, yeah, over the front door.
Uh-huh.
And then the little one, that...
In the back room.
Yeah, which I think was servants' quarters.
Yeah, I
obviously,
do too. That's
originally.
That's why I ask you. Yeah.
And I think we would have hired a cook or somebody, but you couldn't get anyone during the war.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else on your list?
No, I don't think so, Ann.
I think we've had a good interview. It's been fun to get to know you.
No, I could make up some stories, but I think we covered everything.